Dearest listeners, it is a truth universally acknowledged that the most passionate loves often bloom in the most barren of circumstances, rather like orchids flourishing in winter, one might say. Today, this author brings you the most extraordinary tale of how duty's cold chains were transformed into devotion's silken bonds. But let us not rush, for the best scandals, like the finest wine, must be savored properly. One must confess, when Miss Cordelia Brightwater first entered the drawing room of Ravenscroft House on that fateful April morning, this author nearly wept at the sight. Here was a creature of sunshine and curiosity, her fingers still bearing the telltale stains of plant pressings, being delivered like a sacrificial lamb to what all of society deemed the coldest altar in England. The Brightwater family's predicament was, regrettably, all too common amongst the genteel poor. Sir Brightwater, bless his scholarly soul, had invested the family's modest fortune in what he believed to be a revolutionary canal project. Alas, gentle listeners, the only thing revolutionary about it was the speed with which it relieved him of every last penny. With 3 younger daughters yet to launch and creditors circling like vultures, what choice did our dear Cordelia have? Lord Sebastian Ravenscroft, Earl of Blackmore, was known throughout the ton for 3 things: his substantial fortune, his magnificent estate, and his complete indifference to social pleasantries. At 9 and 20, he had rebuffed no fewer than 17 attempts by matchmaking mamas to secure him for their daughters. This author has it on good authority that Lady Jersey herself had declared him utterly impossible after he spent an entire dinner at Almack's reading a book on agricultural innovations. Would you believe, dearest listeners, that when the arrangement was first proposed, Lord Ravenscroft merely nodded and returned to his correspondence? His solicitor later reported that his lordship's only question was whether Miss Brightwater would require a separate greenhouse for her botanical pursuits. A most peculiar inquiry for a man supposedly devoid of sentiment, would you not agree? Poor Cordelia received the news whilst cataloguing wildflower specimens in her father's study. This author's heart quite broke when informed of how she carefully set down her magnifying glass, straightened her shoulders, and declared with admirable composure that she would do whatever was necessary for her family's welfare. But oh, gentle listeners, the tears that fell upon those pressed flowers when she believed herself alone. Even now, this author requires a moment to compose herself at the memory. The settlement was arranged with unseemly haste. Within a fortnight, the contracts were signed, the modest trousseau assembled, and our brave botanist prepared to exchange her freedom for her family's salvation. Society, naturally, was agog. The betting books at White's gave the marriage 6 months at most before the new countess would retreat to the country permanently, driven away by her husband's Arctic demeanor. Lady Cowper confided to this author that she had never seen a more mismatched pair: the vibrant naturalist and the granite earl. How little Lady Cowper knew of what nature herself teaches us about unlikely symbiosis. The wedding itself was a stark affair at St. George's, Hanover Square, attended by only the immediate families and a handful of witnesses. This author, naturally, managed to secure an invitation through channels that shall remain nameless. One must confess, the sight of Lord Ravenscroft waiting at the altar was unexpected. Gone was the habitually distracted expression that characterized his rare public appearances. Instead, dearest listeners, there stood a man whose dark eyes never once strayed from the church doors. When Cordelia appeared, a vision in cream silk, despite the modesty of her gown, something quite remarkable occurred. Lord Ravenscroft's carefully composed features betrayed him for just an instant. A sharp intake of breath, a softening around the eyes, a barely perceptible lean forward as though drawn by an invisible thread. But this author digresses into observations that would not become apparent in their significance until much later. What struck all present was the contrast between bride and groom. She, all golden warmth and barely suppressed vitality. He, dark and contained as a midnight storm. When he took her hand for the vows, several witnesses noted how gently he held it, as though cradling something infinitely precious and fragile. The wedding breakfast at Ravenscroft House was an exercise in exquisite awkwardness. Cordelia attempted conversation with her new husband no fewer than 7 times. Each effort was met with monosyllabic responses, or worse, complete silence, as his lordship seemed perpetually distracted by some invisible concern. This author observed him stealing glances at his bride when he believed no one was watching, only to immediately avert his gaze when she turned toward him. The moment that would later prove most significant occurred when young Lady Emma, Cordelia's youngest sister, accidentally knocked over a vase containing the table's centerpiece, white roses from the Ravenscroft Conservatory. As Cordelia knelt to gather the scattered blooms, she paused, examining one with the practiced eye of a true botanist. Her murmured appreciation of the cultivation required, her observation that whoever tended these understood roses as living things deserving of respect. Oh, gentle listeners, you should have seen Lord Ravenscroft's face. He had been standing at the window, but at her words he turned with such sharpness that his cousin Lord Pemberton nearly dropped his champagne. For a full 10 seconds, this author counted. The Earl stared at his bride with an expression of such naked longing that this author nearly required her vinaigrette. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the mask of indifference descended once more. His lordship informed his bride that the conservatory was at her disposal, before excusing himself from the gathering entirely. Poor Cordelia was left holding the rose, bewilderment written across her lovely features. The wedding guests exchanged knowing looks that said, quite clearly, this union was doomed to be exactly what everyone expected: a cold, convenient arrangement devoid of affection. How wrong they all were, dearest listeners. How magnificently, spectacularly wrong. The first weeks of marriage proved to be an elaborate waltz of avoidance and accidental encounters that would have been amusing had they not been so painfully poignant. Lord Ravenscroft maintained a schedule that seemed specifically designed to minimize contact with his bride. He breakfasted at dawn before she rose. He dined at his club. He retired to his study the moment he returned home. Yet, dearest listeners, the most peculiar things began to occur. Each morning, Cordelia would find fresh specimens left outside her door: rare orchids, unusual ferns, exotic blooms that could only have come from the estate's extensive conservatory. They arrived with no note, no explanation, merely appeared like offerings from some shy woodland deity. The household staff, bless their romantic souls, began reporting the most interesting observations to this author through my lady's maid network. His lordship, it seemed, had taken to rising at 3 in the morning to personally select these specimens. The head gardener, Mr. Weatherby, confided that the Earl spent hours ensuring each cutting was perfect, each bloom at its peak. Meanwhile, our dear Cordelia threw herself into exploration of her new home with the enthusiasm of a true naturalist discovering an uncharted territory. The Ravenscroft Library, she discovered, contained an extensive collection of botanical texts, including several rare volumes she had only dreamed of reading. What she did not know, but this author did, was that Lord Ravenscroft had acquired these specific volumes in the fortnight between their engagement and wedding, at considerable expense and effort. One particularly memorable afternoon, Cordelia ventured into the conservatory for the first time. This author has it on excellent authority from the undergardener, who later reported to my sources that his lordship watched from his study window as she explored the glass paradise, her face alight with wonder. For 2 hours he stood there, ostensibly reading correspondence, but in reality, observing every moment of her joy. The dance of avoidance became increasingly elaborate as the weeks progressed. Cordelia would enter the library only to find his lordship hastily departing through the opposite door, leaving behind still warm tea and a book open to a passage about South American orchids, coincidentally, her particular area of interest. He would arrive at the conservatory moments after she left, the gardeners noting how he would stand precisely where she had stood, touching the same leaves she had examined. This author must confess to a certain frustration during this period. Here were 2 individuals so clearly drawn to one another, yet both so convinced of the other's indifference that they performed this elaborate pantomime of avoidance. Cordelia believed her husband found her presence burdensome, a necessary evil endured for financial necessity. Lord Ravenscroft, meanwhile, was convinced that his bride saw him as nothing more than a cold, convenient solution to her family's troubles. The servants began taking matters into their own hands. The dining schedule mysteriously shifted, making it impossible for his lordship to avoid dining at home. The library doors developed a tendency to stick, trapping both parties inside until a footman could be summoned. The conservatory's heating system required frequent adjustments that somehow necessitated both master and mistress's attention simultaneously. One evening, this author learned, Cordelia discovered a first edition of Linnaeus's Species Plantarum left casually on her usual reading chair. Inside, pressed between the pages, was a perfectly preserved specimen of Cordelia floralis, a flower whose name she shared. The coincidence was too much to be mere chance. Yet when she attempted to thank her husband the next morning, he had already departed for an urgent business matter in town. The transformation began, as the best transformations do, with an accident of fate. Or perhaps, gentle listeners, we should call it providence, for surely the universe itself conspired to bring these two stubborn souls together. It was the occasion of the midsummer ball at Ravenscroft House, an annual tradition that his lordship had attempted to cancel, but was overruled by his formidable aunt, the Dowager Duchess of Ashford. Society descended upon the estate en masse, eager to observe the new countess, and more importantly, to gather gossip about the state of this most unusual marriage. This author arrived fashionably late, as is her custom, to find the ton absolutely buzzing with speculation. Lord and Lady Ravenscroft had performed the opening minuet with perfect technical precision, but such rigid formality that one might have been watching automata rather than newlyweds. They had not danced together since. Cordelia, resplendent in sage-green silk that complemented her complexion beautifully, was holding court near the French doors to the garden, discussing botanical illustrations with Lord Pemberton and Sir James Mitchell. Her husband stood at the opposite end of the ballroom, engaged in what appeared to be a riveting discussion of crop rotation with elderly Lord Fairweather. Then, dearest listeners, disaster struck in the most fortuitous way possible. Young Lord Ashwood, deep in his cups as usual, attempted an ill-advised maneuver during a country dance and crashed directly into a massive flower arrangement. The porcelain urn toppled, sending water cascading across the marble floor and exotic blooms scattering like fleeing butterflies. Without thinking, both Cordelia and Sebastian, for this author must now use his given name as the moment demands such intimacy, rushed toward the chaos from opposite ends of the ballroom. They reached the disaster simultaneously, both kneeling to rescue a particularly rare night-blooming orchid that had been the centerpiece of the arrangement. Their hands touched as they both grasped for the flower. Oh, gentle listeners, the look that passed between them. Time itself seemed to pause in deference to the moment. All the weeks of careful avoidance, of missed connections, of silent longing, crystallized in that single touch. Sebastian's fingers closed over Cordelia's, not in possession, but in protection, shielding her hand from the broken porcelain. Cordelia's eyes, wide with surprise, met her husband's dark gaze. What she saw there caused her lips to part in a small gasp of recognition. For in that unguarded moment, Sebastian's entire soul was laid bare. All the longing, all the desperate hope, all the fear of rejection that had kept him distant these many weeks. He helped her to her feet with infinite gentleness, still cradling the rescued orchid between them. For a moment that stretched like eternity, they stood frozen, oblivious to their audience, lost in a private world of revelation. Then the spell was broken by the Dowager Duchess's commanding voice calling for the servants to address the mess. Sebastian stepped back, his mask sliding back into place, but not before pressing the orchid into Cordelia's hands, with a touch that lingered just a heartbeat too long to be proper. What happened next, dearest listeners, very nearly destroyed everything before it had a chance to truly begin. Lady Ashwood, a notorious gossip and, dare this author say, troublemaker of the first order, chose that precise moment to make an observation loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. She remarked to her companion that it was such a shame about the Ravenscroft marriage that everyone knew his lordship had only agreed to it because his aunt threatened to cut off his access to the botanical collections at Ashford Park if he did not marry by his 30th birthday. The blood drained from Cordelia's face so quickly that this author feared she might faint. The orchid slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, falling to the marble floor with a soft, tragic sound. Now, gentle listeners, this author must tell you that Lady Ashwood's assertion was complete and utter fabrication. The Dowager Duchess had made no such threat, but Cordelia, already convinced of her husband's indifference, saw this as confirmation of her worst fears, that she was nothing more than a means to an end, a convenient bride who happened to be available at the right price. She fled the ballroom with admirable composure, but those of us who observed closely saw the shimmer of tears she fought to contain. Sebastian, engaged in conversation across the room, did not immediately notice her departure. When he did, and when Lord Pemberton helpfully repeated Lady Ashwood's poisonous words, the Earl's face underwent a transformation this author shall never forget. Rage, pure and deadly, flashed in his eyes, followed immediately by something far worse: despair. He started after his wife, but the Dowager Duchess intercepted him, insisting he could not abandon his guests. The frustration on his face as he was forced to remain and fulfill his duties as host, while his wife suffered under such a terrible misapprehension, was truly pitiful to behold. But what no one except the servants saw, and what was later reported to this author by the head footman, was that Lord Ravenscroft, after the last guest departed, spent the remainder of the night in the conservatory. He carefully retrieved the fallen orchid from the ballroom floor, its petals now bruised but not beyond saving, and tenderly planted it in a special pot, as though by preserving this symbol of their brief connection, he might somehow preserve hope itself. For 3 days following the ball, Cordelia kept to her chambers, claiming a headache. Sebastian haunted the hallway outside her door like a ghost, unable to bring himself to knock, convinced she would refuse to see him. He left offerings, her favorite books, rare specimens, even a letter that he wrote and rewrote a dozen times before ultimately destroying it, according to his valet. This author learned from Cordelia's lady's maid that her mistress spent those 3 days in a state of quiet devastation. She had begun to hope, you see. That moment in the ballroom, that touch, that look, she had begun to believe that perhaps her husband might come to care for her. Lady Ashwood's words had shattered that fragile hope like glass. Meanwhile, Sebastian tortured himself with the certainty that Cordelia now knew the truth, not about any fictional ultimatum from his aunt, but what he believed to be the transparent truth of his feelings. He was convinced she had fled because she was repulsed by the depth of emotion she had seen in his eyes, that she wanted no part of his pathetic devotion. Oh, dearest listeners, has there ever been a more frustrating pair of mutual misunderstanders? This author was quite tempted to lock them in a room together and not let them out until they had spoken honestly. The resolution to this painful impasse came from a most unexpected source: Lady Emma, Cordelia's youngest sister, who had been visiting for the week. The child, for she was barely 17, possessed more sense than the rest of society combined. She had observed the dancing disaster, heard Lady Ashwood's lies, witnessed her sister's retreat and her brother-in-law's agony. Most importantly, being nearly as passionate about botany as her elder sister, she had been curious about the source of the exotic specimens that appeared daily at Cordelia's door. Specimens far too rare to be found in any ordinary conservatory. Her investigation led her to explore the lesser-used wings of the house, following a trail of plant clippings and soil that the meticulous Lord Ravenscroft had unknowingly left in his pre-dawn flower-gathering expeditions. There, in the east wing, she found the study where Sebastian truly worked, not his public study where he received visitors, but a private sanctuary hidden away from prying eyes. And there, gentle listeners, she discovered something extraordinary. The walls were covered, absolutely covered, with botanical illustrations. Not just any illustrations, but detailed, loving renditions of every flower that had been left at Cordelia's door. Pages and pages of notes about each specimen, where it grew, its properties, its symbolism in the language of flowers. And in the center of it all, a portrait of Cordelia herself, painted from memory with such tender detail that even this cynical author might have wept upon seeing it. But most damning of all was the journal that lay open on the desk, filled with entries dating back to that first morning when Cordelia had entered the Ravenscroft drawing room. Young Emma, bless her brave heart, did what needed to be done. She stole the journal. That evening, she confronted her sister in her chambers. This author was not present for this conversation, but the aftermath was visible to all. Cordelia emerged from her rooms like a woman transformed, clutching a leather journal to her chest, her eyes bright with unshed tears and something else, determination. She found Sebastian in the conservatory at midnight, tending to the rescued orchid he had planted 3 nights prior, the very bloom they had saved together at the ball. This author knows because she may have been taking a very late evening stroll through the gardens and happened to have an excellent view through the glass walls. What? Even chroniclers of society must have their methods. When he became aware of Cordelia's presence, he froze like a deer sensing danger. She approached slowly, as one might approach a wild creature one does not wish to frighten away. This author could not hear their words through the glass. But oh, gentle listeners, their faces told the entire story. Cordelia held out the journal. Sebastian's expression cycled through shock, horror, and then, when he realized she was not fleeing, a hope so fragile it was painful to witness. She opened the journal and pointed to a passage. His face crumbled. He sank onto a nearby bench, his head in his hands, the picture of a man whose deepest secrets had been laid bare. But then, Cordelia knelt before him, gently taking his hands from his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. What she showed him next was her own journal, retrieved from her chambers. Even from a distance, this author could see the pages were filled with pressed flowers. Every single specimen he had left at her door, carefully preserved and annotated with her own observations and, dare one say, hopes. The kiss that followed was everything a first kiss should be. Tender, desperate, a communion of souls, too long separated by misunderstanding and fear. This author definitely did not applaud from the garden. That would have been most improper. The transformation of the Ravenscroft marriage following that midnight revelation was nothing short of miraculous. Within days, the entire ton was buzzing with the change in the formerly cold Earl and his supposedly unwanted bride. They were seen actually conversing at the Pemberton soiree, dancing more than the requisite 2 dances at Almack's, walking together in Hyde Park during the fashionable hour, so absorbed in each other that they forgot to acknowledge acquaintances. Most shocking of all, Lord Ravenscroft was observed actually smiling, not once, but frequently. But the true triumph, dearest listeners, came at the end of the season with the unveiling of the Ravenscroft Winter Garden. Sebastian had been secretly constructing it for months, even before their wedding, though he had told himself it was merely an expansion of the estate's botanical collection. In truth, every choice, every detail had been made with Cordelia in mind. Tropical blooms that would flower year-round, specimens from every continent, a library alcove with all the botanical texts she could desire, and, most touchingly, a section devoted entirely to Cordelia floralis, the flower that bore her name. At the very heart of this section stood a single night-blooming orchid in a place of honor, the very one they had rescued together, now thriving and beautiful, its once bruised petals fully restored. A small plaque beside it read simply, "Where love truly began." The opening was a triumph. All of society attended, if only to satisfy their curiosity about the formerly cold Earl, who now looked at his wife as though she had hung the very stars. But what they found exceeded all expectations. The winter garden was a paradise, yes, but it was also a love letter written in living color. Every plant had been chosen because it appeared in one of Cordelia's botanical illustrations. The arrangement followed the path of their courtship, from the formal specimens near the entrance, through the wild meadow flowers representing their misunderstandings, to the exotic orchids of their reconciliation. But the true coup de théâtre waited at the garden's heart. There, in a perfect clearing surrounded by night-blooming jasmine, stood a simple pedestal holding 2 items: Sebastian's journal, open to the first entry he had written after meeting Cordelia, and beside it, a new entry dated that very morning. The entry was brief but public, meant for all society to read. In it, Sebastian confessed that he had loved Cordelia from the moment she entered his life, that every cold word and distant gesture had been the product of fear that she would never return the feelings of a man who had forgotten how to show his heart to the world. He thanked her for teaching him that love was worth the risk of rejection, that vulnerability was not weakness but the greatest strength of all. Cordelia, standing beside her husband as society read this public declaration, whispered something in his ear that made him laugh, actually laugh, before pulling her into an embrace that was definitely not proper for public viewing, but which this author thoroughly approved of nonetheless. Lady Ashwood, the originator of that poisonous lie at the midsummer ball, had the grace to look ashamed. The Dowager Duchess of Ashford announced loudly that she had never made any ultimatum about marriage, and that anyone who suggested otherwise was a nincompoop of the highest order. And so, gentle listeners, what began as a marriage of convenience, a cold contract to save one family from ruin and supposedly provide another with a reluctant heir, became something far greater. It became a partnership of minds, a meeting of souls, a love that grew not despite duty, but through it. This author has it on excellent authority that Lord Ravenscroft's journal continues to this day, no longer hidden but shared with his wife each evening as they work side by side in their winter garden. The entries are no longer filled with longing and regret, but with joy, gratitude, and observations about their shared life that would make even this hardened chronicler of society believe in happy endings. I am told that just last week, Cordelia discovered a new species of orchid in their conservatory, a natural hybrid that had occurred between two seemingly incompatible species. She named it Sebastiana devotus. His lordship was observed by the entire gardening staff to have something in his eye that required his wife's immediate attention. The fact that this attention took the form of a rather passionate embrace was surely medicinal in nature. As for the Brightwater family, they have prospered under Lord Ravenscroft's careful management. The three younger sisters have all made splendid matches, though none quite so dramatic as their eldest sister's transformation of duty into devotion. Lady Emma, in particular, has become known for her uncanny ability to see through facades to the truth beneath, a skill she claims to have learned from watching her sister's romance unfold. Sir Brightwater has been given his own laboratory for his experiments, though he is strictly forbidden from making any financial investments without his son-in-law's approval. The betting books at White's have long since closed on the Ravenscroft marriage. The only wager that remains is how many botanical volumes Lord Ravenscroft will purchase for his wife before their library requires a third expansion. Current estimates suggest the number is infinite. And so, gentle listeners, another tale reaches its blessed conclusion. Two souls who might have spent a lifetime in cold politeness instead found the courage to reveal their hearts. They discovered that duty need not be the enemy of love, but can be the very soil in which it grows, provided one tends it with honesty, courage, and perhaps a few night-blooming orchids that survive their initial trials to bloom more beautifully than ever. This author withdraws until our next encounter, but before I go, I leave you with this observation. The next time you see a forced smile at a society gathering, or witness a marriage that seems cold on its surface, remember Lord and Lady Ravenscroft. Remember that the deepest loves often hide behind the highest walls, and that sometimes, just sometimes, those walls need only the smallest crack to let the light flood in. And remember too that sometimes it takes a curious younger sister, a rescued orchid, and a hidden journal to help that light find its way. Until then, remember, the greatest scandals often lead to the greatest happiness, and the coldest winters can give birth to the most magnificent gardens. Your devoted chronicler, Lady Ravenswood,